So welcome again to the Train the Trainer podcast. And this time I'm talking with Dan Fraser. Normally I will give a very long introduction and so on, but now I'm a little bit confused because of his great book, Kickass Presentations, Wow Audiences with PowerPoint slides that click, humor that's quick, and message that stick. But the first question then is, how should we start this podcast according to your book?
According to my book, it would not be with a long, boring introduction. It would
I
be
think
getting
so.
right to something that is
Yeah,
important to the audience,
yeah,
which is something we tend as speakers not to do.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we would want to get maybe right into a story,
yeah.
a
I would
story
love to.
about.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure. Well,
yeah.
I can talk about how this book even came to be. I
Great.
was very fortunate. I'm from Canada. I worked with the Calgary Police Service. I spent a career there, and a lot of that in training. And when I was leaving our training academy, and I taught there, I taught tactics, all of the hands-on type of training for the academy and for in-service officers for about 6 years. And when I left, I had a couple of instructors ask me, "Hey, would you put together a course on how to actually teach and then come back and deliver that?" And I thought, okay, I guess I was doing something right this whole time. And
Yeah,
this has led my life on a different trajectory for the last over a decade. And it did lead me to really take a look at what am I doing? What is effective? Uh, how is it effective? And then how can I effectively pass that on to other people? And that led me to develop a workshop that I called Kickass Presentations, and then eventually into
yeah,
writing putting it all into a book and publishing a book, which is a whole other thing.
yeah.
Uh, and that's how that came to be. And it's I'm still dedicate much of my life to instructor development and to helping people to be better speakers and to have officers and everybody who goes into a presentation not only learn something that they can take away and use, but also have an enjoyable experience
Yeah.
and have instructors have enjoyable experiences in teaching and ultimately have people create presentations that don't suck.
Yeah. Well, what would be a boring opening of this podcast according to your philosophy? That it,
Well, if we equate a podcast to a
typical.
presentation,
Yeah,
how does it often start? It often starts with visiting with the audience. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Really honored to be a part of this. And then we're going to launch into a long biography of here's me and here's what I have done. And I have spent this many years doing this, and I have this award, and et cetera, et cetera. And the whole audience is going, they're starting to look at their phone because there's nothing to grab people immediately. And it's a part of the training that I deliver is how do you rock your opening? How do you
yeah.
hook people at the start? And there is technique for that.
Hmm.
Instead of just going into what we've always done. And I mean, it's not terrible, but we can do better. And I'm always looking to see what can we do, especially what is the smallest change that I can make that's going to give me the biggest difference. And just changing how we open a presentation and even how we open a podcast is
Yeah.
probably part of that.
Well, great. And we will come back to it, of course, later. Well, you already mentioned it, your biography. I have to say it right now because otherwise, it's also in your book that if you don't if I don't say anything about you, people are watching and thinking, "Who is this man?"
Of course, we need to
Yeah,
establish credibility, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, uh, well, well, again, this is really a great book. This is a how-to-do book. That's what I love. It's not only what and what can we do, but it's what to do. And well, you served as a police officer, instructor, and now you have your own company. You're also working for Rapid Protection for.
I am. Yes. So I've got my own consulting company, Fraser
Yeah,
Training Solutions. And then I've been very fortunate to work very closely with Chris Butler,
yeah.
who developed a methods of instruction course with Raptor Protection. And I'm very fortunate to be one of the instructors for that, which is just an amazing program. I also work with uh, Ken Murray with
Ah,
the Reality Based Training Association in delivering his instructor school, especially
wow.
when they come up to teach that in Canada. So I'm very I have a lot of spinning plates
Yeah.
to keep spinning. I was retired from policing and then recently got back into policing,
Mm.
where this is a crazy program that the Canadian National Police have, the RCMP, where they take officers who have experience, whether you're retired or you have a number of years. They give you a couple of weeks of training, they give you a badge and a gun, and you can decide where you're going to work and when you're going to work, and you just fill in wherever. So I've been back in uniform, back on patrol, working near the city of Calgary where I live, and it's been a really great experience and really positive for me in being back into the operational environment, because that really helps keep what I teach connected to what's
Mm.
actually going on. And then also being a student again, and being
Yeah.
a student in another agency where I'm used to being the one training the instructors. Now I'm in the student's chair looking at it from that perspective. And it's been very interesting. So I keep very busy with all of the various teaching and those kind of things. And I'm very blessed to be able to do what I do.
And are you a better cop now with all those years of learning how to speak, but maybe also teaching a lot?
I hope I'm not a worse cop for it. I would assume so. I'm certainly a better instructor now than even when I left the Calgary Police a few years ago. Uh, just because I've just taken such a deep dive into instructor development. And I look back, as we all do as instructors, you learn something new and you look back and you go, oh, how could
Mm.
I have done it that way for so many years? I was so stupid, or what did I put my students through? But that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
When you do the best you can, and then
Yeah.
once you know better, you do better. And
Well, yeah.
hopefully I'm doing better.
This is totally, I'm not, I have prepared all those questions and I have just finished one question. Now I'm totally off topic, but I don't care because I want to
All
ask
good.
you, all good. Uh, what are the major developments in Canada and the US with regard to police training? For example, here in Holland, we did for a long time already like ecological approach. It was not named like that, but we did I think from 10 to 15 years already. And also other teaching games for understanding all those methods. And our teacher instructors programs are very long. So they were in my time, I did a 2 year in company training to become an instructor, and we had all those modules and so on. So in the Netherlands, I think maybe a little bit of motor learning has evolved. And maybe less boot camp, more learning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and there is
agree.
more research. But
Yeah.
what are the major developments in your part of the world?
I don't see any. I want us to get more towards ecological dynamics. I would love to see that, and it's starting to happen a little bit. And for anybody who's not familiar, probably if you've listened to Eric, you know what it is. But even taking the training that we're doing and making it less about the technique and more about
Mm,
the principle and the objective, if we can do that, that's good. And I see more agencies going towards that, more of an integrated approach, less siloed training.
mm.
Some of the big silos that we have, like firearms, control tactics, de-escalation, or interpersonal communications, are still quite siloed. However, there's it seems like there's a lot more skill sets that are expected of officers. For example, over the last decade, it seems like every agency now has some form of hemorrhage control or tourniquets and wound packing and dealing with gunshot wounds, and that has been integrated into scenario-based training. And certainly, scenario-based training is, people understand that it's the way to go, and there needs to be more of that. I don't think we're there yet as to where it really needs to be, but there's certainly a lot more of that going on than there was even a decade ago. So yeah, and it's hard to comment sometimes, because a lot of the trainers that I interact with are the very progressive ones who are doing the things that are making their officers better and are really intentional about going out and learning new things, new techniques that they can bring in, and better ways to train. And then we have a whole another set of instructors who are probably talented, who are very well intentioned, but just don't know what they don't know, and they are, like everywhere, just doing what their instructor had them doing, and some things have not changed for decades. And it's always exciting to me to see when a department changes some things. And I was very fortunate with the Calgary Police Service to be there and be not only part of some of the changes, but to just see the evolution of some of the training. And when I go into run a class or a program, I go, wow, this is excellent. I don't know how it can get better. And then let's fast forward 3 years later, and it is so much better. And I have to keep reminding myself of that there's no, we can't win. It's like, it's like golf or jujitsu. It's there's no end. You don't ever win. You just continue to improve.
Great. Can we go back to the speaking then?
Absolutely.
Okay. Why are presentation skills, I just want to pull the book up again. Why are presentation skills important for first responder trainers? And with presentations, I don't necessarily mean PowerPoint presentation, but why is the art of communicating presentation, why is it so important for us law enforcement trainers?
Yeah, I think it's because with the job that our officers do is so critically important, and the things that we're teaching, whether it's a physical skill, whether it's something to do with firearms, or whether it's something to do with law, is going to be critically important. And ultimately, we have to look at, are we changing the behavior of our students at the time when they actually need it? So there's the two critical parts of changing that behavior. One is retention. So we need our officers to actually retain and remember what we taught them. And that might be remembering it because it was a classroom session and they really need to know. It might be a physical skills session where we need them to be able to control somebody or execute this type of movement to be able to be effective. So they need to be able to retain that. And then once we have that, we need them to be able to transfer that knowledge into what the research literature will say is a novel environment or a new environment, something that is different from the training environment. And with law enforcement, every situation that we go into is going to be slightly different, likely, than what we've dealt with before. So can we remember and retain what we learned and then be able to perform that in the field under the conditions that we need it when it counts? So it is critically important that we go back to the type of training that we deliver and how we deliver it, to be very purposeful in doing the best job that we can, because it's not just about the students walking out of a class going, wow, that was excellent. That's great if they're saying that about you as an instructor or about the material, but ultimately the real test is weeks or months or potentially even years later when they actually need that information or those skills. So it's critically important that we're really looking at everything that we're teaching and going, how are we doing this? Why are we doing it this way? and how can we do this better?
And what in this context, what are presentation skills? I mean, maybe I'm just totally improvising this now, but maybe I can be a total hork, you know, be you know, but have a lot of experience and just say do this, do that, and so on. But you're talking about you know, getting them involved, getting them active, don't bore them out, even telling jokes and doing all those things. Do you think these skills are lacking in
I think they're totally lacking. I think if
oh
you ask most, well, I don't know what it's like. Maybe Europe is doing things so much better, but my experience around North American law enforcement training is that the bar for entry into teaching classroom training is so low.
mm,
The expectations are so low that it's not done well. So typically, from my experience, how this goes is that you become an instructor of something, and you either get handed a big binder full of papers that here's the big book of how you're going to do this. Perhaps that's a file on a computer now or on a flash drive, and you're going to get the PowerPoint.
yeah.
They're going to go, here's what the last person did, and then the first step is just learning that and then regurgitating it. And for the most part, how those presentations are built, they're built by taking the policy and the manuals, et cetera, that have been written, and we cut and we paste all of those words onto a screen. So we're taking a document and we're putting it onto a presentation screen. We give the instructor job to just about anybody who can read, and they stand up there and they read off of the slides, and then we can put a check mark in a box and go, Eric was in my class. I know that his eyeballs saw these words, therefore he is trained. And that's so far from what we actually need. And what I see is lacking is real instructor development training that takes uh, takes instructors through how to actually do this. And this was one of the reasons that I wrote the book that I did, is because I went searching for years for so much presentation training, and a lot of it doesn't tell you. They'll tell you what to do, but they won't tell you how to do it.
Yeah,
So they'll say, you
exactly.
know what you got to do, Eric? You got to be dynamic.
Yeah.
You got to engage your audience. You got to, and people go, oh my God, this is wonderful stuff. Great, but how do you actually do that? And it's like all training, it's not about what you can do as the instructor. It's about what your students can actually do when they leave. So you might be incredible, but your job is now to make your students incredible. So what I really aim to do with this book and with all of my training is, let's take people who are maybe not as engaged or excited about being a trainer as I am, or that everybody is, and let's take them, hold them by the hand, and let's walk them through the steps of how to actually do some of these things. And again, where can the smallest change get us the biggest gain in that?
Yeah.
Uh, and and
And
let's get
if,
away from reading words on a screen, because
and
that
if,
is the we
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, of course. If you can doing the smallest thing with the biggest change. If instructors are listening right now and they are going to give a PowerPoint presentation, let's say, what would be one small thing to do with the biggest change if you had to choose one or two? What can I do?
Absolutely.
What can I do better? The next PowerPoint I give.
We can use less words and more pictures. Less words, more pictures. So people can either read or they can listen to you, and they can't do both at the same time. They can quickly switch back and forth. But putting too many words on a screen, and when I mean too many words, probably if you have a sentence or a paragraph, especially where you need to put punctuation in there, that's probably too many words.
Mm.
So if instructors can look at their each slide that I'll say that this presentation is already built, they're already delivering it, or they've inherited this from somebody else. They already understand what the students really need to take away from this. Now we start looking at the individual slides. Look at it with the view of what is the takeaway message for my audience. If they had to remember one thing about this slide in a year from now, what would that be? And put that on the slide. And that is often having a picture, because we tend to think in pictures. We tend to remember pictures a lot better, and maybe a word or a few words. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow your students to have an image that they can relate to the topic, but it also keeps you as the presentation. What's on the screen isn't the presentation. They should be focused on you. So now they can glance over. We can make these slides just sort of glanceable. They look over, they go, yep, I get that. And then their eyes are back on you, because you are the presentation and you are explaining everything, but that takeaway message is still up there. So they're getting it from a number of different ways. And it also prevents you as the instructor from turning around and reading off of the screen. You know, I've had instructors say, well, I don't know the material well enough. I need all of those words up there as prompts. And my answer to that is, you need to do more preparation.
Yeah.
You owe it to your audience to do more preparation. And that's part of doing the hard work of being an instructor, is taking all of this and walking through it and rehearsing and making sure that you know your material at a much deeper level.
Yeah.
One of the instructors who I'm a real fan of his courses, which is Will Petty from Centrifuge Training. And I even quote him in my book, where he says, everyone wants to be an instructor until it's time to do instructor shit. And that's that's the hard part, is all of the prep work. It's not the glory of standing at the front of the room and trying to be the sage on the stage and getting high fives from all the students who think you're amazing. It's putting in all of the work ahead of time so that you can focus on what your students or your audience actually needs.
Great. Suddenly a thought came into my mind. If you say that less words, what was less words, more pictures?
More pictures. Yeah.
Less words.
More pictures.
Does this also translates to teaching? For example, we have what is called observational learning. So would it also be is it the same if I give a good demonstration, visual demonstration of a tactic without talking too much? Do you think it has the same value as on the PowerPoint slide?
I don't know if it has the same value as far as teaching a motor skill. And I understand what you're saying, providing a really good demonstration where the students' mirror motor neurons are it's firing in their motor cortex, saying, I need to do this. But I agree that it is important, and that we are showing students especially new learners, showing them what we want them to do, as opposed to the incorrect thing or somebody doing things poorly. And this is always a challenge in law enforcement, because I spend and have spent a lot of time teaching interpersonal communications. And it is very difficult to find excellent examples of police communication because it's not sexy. Nobody who pulled their phone out to video that is going to put that on YouTube or anywhere else, because the officer came in, he did a wonderful job of calming this person down and was respectful, and nobody wants to see that. So finding good demonstrations of that can be difficult. Whereas if you want to look for videos of police officers getting angry and not being appropriate with people, there's a ton of examples out there. So you're right, it is finding examples of what we want them to remember, and having images that are going to be effective at having them recall the correct thing at the time when it's needed. Yeah.
Because from my own experience, I had some great mentors in policing, and I can still see them. I can still see them doing things, and it's on my mind. I can, and the same when I studied as a psychologist. And then we had how do you call it? We were talking therapy. And where I learned the
Right.
most, where I learned the most was when my mentor was, showing it with another. It wasn't role playing, of course, but I can still feel it. You can see it. Yeah,
Yeah. Providing correct demonstrations is
yeah,
super important. And I think back to some of my mentors in this, and we talked before we started recording this podcast about guys like Brian Willis and
yeah.
Chris Butler, who, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Of these are people who inspired me, that when I came into the academy in the 1990s with the Calgary Police, I had them as my instructors, and I went, whatever else I wanted to do in policing is now less important
So
than
yeah,
trying to be like those guys. And I
yeah.
still remember some of the presentations that they gave back then, and that's just how impactful they could be. I know one of your guests recently was Jeff Quayle
Yeah,
from Setcan,
yeah.
and I recently was able to have dinner with him, and I talked about a presentation that he gave in 2003 that I attended. And I
Mhm.
remembered so much of it. He goes, "You remember more of this than I do." And I said, well, this was the way that he delivered it was so impactful that it's still
Yeah,
clacking around in
yeah,
my head like the ball inside a paint can
yeah,
over 2 decades later. So
yeah.
we really have to think about the impact that we're having on our students. And it's not just getting a flash drive with a PowerPoint and, yep, you'll
No.
just go talk through this. It's you have a real opportunity here to make an impact with your students.
You also in the book talk about a lot of things, but one of the things is, well, I will frame it as a question. What can law enforcement trainers learn from stand-up comedians? And I heard you
Yes,
talking about
well,
it. Yeah. Yeah.
so this is something that, yeah, I started doing stand up
Wow.
on my 40th birthday. I shouldn't say I started, but it was a very weird way to get into stand-up comedy. Most people start when they're young. I was always just a fan of stand-up comedy, and I envied their ability to use words and to hold an audience's attention, etc. And so I ended up with my wife going to this transformation weekend. It's like a Tony Robbins type of thing. Uh, and one of the things was to narrow down all of your goals for that year into something that would be just a stretch that, if you could do it, that would be great. And mine came down to, okay, this is the year I'm going to try stand-up comedy. So that was on the Friday night, and on this, you had to go and write down what you were going to do, and you put it on a sticky note and you put it at the front of the room. And there's maybe 150 people in this conference. And the next morning, somebody from the staff comes to me and they said, "Hey, so where are you at with this whole comedy thing?" And I said, I'm nowhere. It's just something I'm interested in doing." And they said, "Okay." So later that afternoon, they start talking about taking actionable steps towards your goal and taking a big leap into what you want to
Mm.
accomplish. And they start calling a few people up to the stage.
Ooh.
And I looked at my wife and I said, here we go. I know they're going to call me. And they did. And so there was, the first woman wanted to do a triathlon, but she was afraid to swim. And they said, well, go get your bathing suit because there's a triathlon coach, a swim coach waiting at the hotel pool right now. And so when they finally got to me, I wish I had something funnier to say than stand-up comedy. But they said, what's your goal? And I said, I'd like to do stand-up. And they said, okay, can you do 8 or 9 minutes of stand-up for everybody here in 30 minutes from now? And I went, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Okay. So I got off the stage and they said, do you need anything? And I said, I just need time to maybe get my thoughts together and write a little bit. And of course I go back out and I I didn't die. I, I I got a standing ovation, but everybody got a standing ovation for
Yeah.
just for trying it out.
Yeah, yeah,
But then I had somebody come to me after and say, "Hey, would you be you should take the stand-up course. I know a guy who runs training for it." And I contacted him and I signed up for a course and the course got canceled. But he said, "Do you want to come and enter a stand-up competition?" And I said, "Yeah, but you don't understand. I'm trying to learn this. Why would I enter a competition?" And he goes, "You're a speaker. You're confident in front of people. Just put together some material and come out to this show." And so I did, and stupidly invited friends and family and all this kind of stuff, and got up there. And again, I didn't. It wasn't horrible. I got a few laughs, and that just kind of started me into this whole world of stand-up comedy, and has led me to do, you know, well over, I'm at 150 shows and in 3 countries, and it's been a really neat experience. And I didn't realize at the time the connection to law enforcement training or to training in general. And then I started really looking at this and going, there's not that many people who are in the comedy world and, say, the corporate speaking world. There's very few that are connecting those two things. And I started looking at what are the commonalities. And one of them is, just like we talked about at the start of this podcast, that you never see a comedian walk out there and go, "Hello, my name's Dan Fraser. I've been doing comedy for 8 years. I have performed at this place and this place. I've earned this award," because that's not funny. And you're only there to elicit an emotional response, which is laughter. And yes, it is horrifying when you don't get that, especially with something that you think is going to be amazing and you get a bunch of blank stares. And it's, when it goes well, it goes well. When it doesn't, it really, really doesn't. And I started looking at some of the ways that that comedians prepare for how they get on stage. Some of the ways that I was preparing, as far as using memory techniques, etc., to be able to recall, so I didn't have to use notes. And really looking at the importance of engaging an audience emotionally, because we really are emotional creatures and we are engaged through emotion. And the analogy I like to use is, if you think, Eric, about, you're going to go to a conference or a course, you're going to go in and you're going to see a 1 hour presentation. But you have the choice now. You can go into one of two presentations and they're both going to be the same information, even maybe the same instructor, but in one of them, you're not going to laugh at all. It's just going to be the information. And then the other one, during that 1 hour, you are going to laugh or even smirk one time at a funny thing. Which presentation are you going to go to?
Yeah, the last one, of course.
The last one.
Yeah.
So if we know that, and we all want that as an audience, why are we not being purposeful about building that into our own training? Because ultimately we need to have people's attention before we can have retention. We need to have people paying attention. And nowadays people are used to getting a little bit of entertainment with their information. We're really competing against all of the other modes of the way that people learn, and certainly with younger people in classes now. This evening, I'm training a security company here in Calgary, and the average age is late teens, early 20s. I asked in a class recently about where people, if they remember where they were during 9/11, and there were people in the class who weren't even born yet. Yeah. So you're competing against TikTok and all of these other things that they spend a lot of time interacting with, that are also entertaining. So it's not about being, having people laughing so hard that they're falling out of their seats, etc. Like, professional comedians have a hard time doing that, but it's about being a little bit more purposeful about going, what would be a little bit more entertaining with this, or what's a silly pun or joke that I could make about this slide. And one of the things I talk about in the book is an easy way to add some humor and really it's humor. It's not necessarily comedy that we're talking about in presentations, but is to take the pictures that you have. If you're going to use a picture of something, and when you're doing an image search, type in that type of picture and funny.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
what yeah, and it's going to come up with some different options for you, and at least it gets you starting to think that, oh, you know what, I could have a picture of this, which would be much funnier than just a standard picture of a plant or whatever is going to be in your presentation. And not that they all need to be like that, but the bar is set so low, right? In law enforcement training, the students do not come in thinking that this is going to be fun or entertaining.
No.
They typically they go, oh, here we go, another one, death by
Yeah,
PowerPoint. We're going to sit here
yeah,
and have somebody talk at us and read off the screen. And so it doesn't take much to be so much better than everybody else who's doing
yeah.
it, and just by being a little bit more purposeful. And so I like to walk people through that and show people that there's some formula to writing jokes. It's not just about some people are funny and some are not.
Oh, that's
This
great.
is
Yeah,
this is yeah, exactly. And it's a
yeah,
muscle that we can build up through exercises. So why not? Like
yeah,
if you want to be a more effective instructor, why wouldn't we do that
yeah,
for our
great.
students?
Yeah,
It's what we would want. Yeah,
yeah. And you already mentioned it, eh? It's not either you have it or you don't have it. There are some techniques and tactics, isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
I personally found out that when an instructor had a lot of humor, it was always great to be in his class. It makes it,
Absolutely.
yeah, and the right balance, of course. Yeah, it's
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a tough thing is it's easy for instructors to say, well, I'm not even going to try this because I might offend somebody or those kind of things. And that's true. We're unfortunately in a day and age when there are people just waiting to be offended in every
yeah,
group, even in law enforcement. Um,
yeah. That's true. Yeah, that's
but
difficult. Yeah,
yeah, and so if you're worried, if you think a joke might offend somebody, I would say don't use it, or at least run it by some other people before you try it for the first time.
yeah.
But we don't need to have offensive kind of
No,
humor or something that's going to make fun of the people who are in our class. There's lots of ways that we can just add. It's not even getting people to laugh. It's getting people even to smile or
yeah.
even to smirk and to go, I see what you did there. Oh, that's a clever way of saying this, or that's a slightly funnier way.
Did
That's
it
way
did
better than what we were doing
yeah.
before.
Did it become more difficult in recent years, the how do you call it, the joking part? Because I think here in Holland we are we are very careful about the words today because everyone, as Terry Wallet mentioned to me, everyone is offended. So, in your experience, has it become more complicated?
I think we went through a really society wise, we went through a period, I think during the pandemic, where all of a sudden people were being offended. It seemed by every little thing. And I see us sort of coming out of that now, especially there's sort of a resurgence in comedy where there was a point where it was dangerous to be a comedian and people were
Yeah,
offended by every little thing. And now it seems like the majority of people who were not offended are going, hey, let's just get back to these are just jokes.
yeah,
And I see comedians now doing jokes and uh, touching on topics that they could not have a few years ago. Now that's professional comedians. That's very different than what's going on inside of a professional classroom,
yeah,
right? So we still need to be professional, and look at the type of humor that we're using and going, is this necessary? Is it adding to the message? Is it helping to engage the students? And I would caution, I would say stay on the side of, if you think this might offend somebody, then let's stay away from it, or let's find another way of doing that, because ultimately it's not even really about when it comes to offending. It's important that your students are not offended, but also the things that you teach need to be kept and documented, and potentially this could be under scrutiny by the courts or an inquiry or something like that later. So all of the images that you show, the videos that you show, really need to be defendable as far as are they appropriate? What is the learning objective for the reason that we're showing them? So we do need to be. It's not a free for all. It's not a stand up. You're not in a stand up comedy club, and for some it's more art than science, and it's maybe even stepping into places that they go, oh, I've done this joke or told this story a dozen times and it has never offended anybody, but now somebody says, hey, maybe think about that. And that's something we need to consider as well. Yeah.
So, and to round this part of, because I also want to talk about de-escalation. I have two more questions. I think more, but first I wanted to first I ask the questions, and then you can pick one you like. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
I had prepared the question. What is the curse of knowledge? What is kick-ass body language? And the third one was, how do you know if they've learned? And you mentioned a very nice question Brian Willens asks at the end of a training to ask students. So we have the curse of knowledge, kick-ass body language, and we have how do you know what they've learned? What are good questions to ask?
Wow. Okay.
What
Yeah,
resonates?
those are all great. You know what? I'm going to pick the third one because I think it's the most important when it comes to training. There's different ways that we can evaluate training, and typically outside of a police training academy, the type of training that we get is in short spurts. It's in a 1 hour or a half day training session or 1 day or several days of training. And then the way that we evaluate that is often to give our students a piece of paper and have them evaluate. Maybe they write a test, maybe they have to perform a skill, or they are letting us know in a feedback form what they thought of the course, etc., which is all important things. However, the real test is not whether they can perform that skill or put that knowledge into a written exam at the end of the training. It is at some future point, when are they going to have to perform this, and what type of environment are they going to have to perform it in? And we don't do enough of this in law enforcement, which is called a transfer test. So rather than testing a student right at the end of the training session and going, okay, you're good, you got this, and now we move on and we maybe never talk about it again. How about bringing some or all of these students back in 6 weeks or 4 months from now and put them cold into a situation where they need to either perform that, be able to perform that skill, be able to, use that knowledge in the context of operations, and see if they actually can do that or not. Because we've fooled ourselves in, I think, probably a lot of industries, not just law enforcement. We're not special in this way, in that we don't conduct transfer tests. And so if you look at Force Science's O'Neill studies, where Doctors John and Dawn O'Neill conducted tests for learning inside of a number of large academies in the United States. They looked at certain skills and how they were performed, how they were being taught, and how they were tested. And then they brought these students back in for transfer tests at a later time. And what they found was that simple physical skills broke down and were the students were no longer able to perform them after just 6 weeks. And for complex skills, if we're talking something like disarming somebody of a weapon or using a cranial pressure point, 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, they could not perform all of the key performance indicators that an evaluator could look and go, yes, you know how to do this effectively and safely. And yet we do this in our training all the time, where we give somebody a period of instruction, we have our little test at the end, and then we check the box and we send them out there and hope for the best, and even hope that they can now take these new skills and integrate them with all of the other learning. And we do this. I've seen it with weapon systems such as the taser, where this is an add-on little piece of training that you get later, and hope that when you are using this operationally, that you're able to integrate this into your empty hand techniques and be able to transition effectively from your firearm to your taser, et cetera, and use it in a team environment, and use it where there is low lighting and the person is wearing maybe different clothing than we're used to seeing in training. And then we wonder why things fall apart. So measuring learning is I think a place that we are really not looking at very effectively in law enforcement training. And we tend to have this one and done mentality, or we bring people back in for a little refresher once a year, or once every 3 to 4 years. And it's just not adequate.
Do you know the great book by Dr. Ina Beinboger-Heidel? It's called The Transfer of Learning, 12 levers. 12 levels of transfer. Also recommended to Brian Willis. She is really amazing. And I also had a chapter in my own book about it, to become a transfer designer, not only a trainer, but a transfer designer, so that you can, even before you give the training, you can already start thinking about transfer. And for example, I use transfer timeouts even in one-day trainings, where you can use all kind of nice forms, but they can have 5 minutes to write an email to themselves, what they are going to employ on Monday morning, whatever. There are many ways you can do it, but
yeah, I love it.
It was really an eye-opener for me. The whole thinking about the transfer is not something like, okay, well, I'm a trainer and the transfer is for somebody else. No, you can
No,
do a lot.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I was not aware of that book, and I'll definitely look into that, because it's so many important concepts that we're just not.
Yeah.
It hasn't become part of the law enforcement training culture, at least from my experience in North American training. It's a lot of you get your session and then we never speak of it again.
Yeah, exactly.
And hope for the best.
Yeah,
and then when students fail, we go, well, they were trained. I mean, we trained them to well, maybe, but not effectively, clearly. So yeah, we have a long way to go. So I look forward to
I will send you
digging into that.
Yeah, it's really great.
Thank you.
So till now we have talked about your book. We have talked about stand-up comedians. Grab their attention, use some laughter and so on, and transfer and retention. Can we just move on for some minutes to the de-escalation? Because I also learned that you are doing de-escalation training. This is, of course, a difficult topic. I remember the trainer's bullpen with Robin Engel. She talks about, and I read her reviews, that if we're honest, we know nothing about de-escalation. There is no definition. There is no one model, and we don't know if it works. But still, we're teaching it, of course, and of course on the streets the officers do a good job, eh? But for you, what is de-escalation? And I even heard from a guy named Gary Glukovic. I'm not sure.
Gary Klugowitz. Yes.
He even talks about non-escalation, which I found a very interesting. Non-escalation, de-escalation. But what is de-escalation for you, and is there a kind of method to the madness you use? Is there a model? Is there a theory?
Yeah, there's this. This is a. You've opened a can of worms here, Eric. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot. There's a lot to it, and it's an important conversation because there is no consistency or consensus as to what it is, what it looks like, how it should be taught, etc. Um, what I find is that in general, officers do not really enjoy that kind of training because it seems like it is a quote soft skill
Mm.
and they already know how to talk to people. So we don't need to build rapport and all that. We already know how to do it. We're doing it well. Um, and that's not necessarily the case. I think we can always sharpen what we're doing. Um, in my view, it is lowering the intensity of of a situation. And I find that the conversation very quickly turns to use of force.
Mhm.
And I tend to stay away from that because uh, again, a lot of officers they like to be physical, they like to take action, and they're going, well, if I if somebody's holding a hostage and I shoot them in the face, I'm de-escalating that situation. Like, yeah, yeah, okay. So what you want is more firearms training, which that's fine, but we often forget about just the words and the talking to people
Yeah.
and to be able to lower this intensity of these situations. And I was very fortunate to be exposed to this fairly early in my career. The Calgary Police Service, when they brought in initially verbal judo, which
Ah, yeah.
is it's a good program. It was at the time and perhaps still is the only real off the shelf packaged
Mm.
de-escalation type of program that is available. And they smartly, and this is because of guys like Brian Willis and Chris Butler, smartly did not have academic instructors or maybe just negotiators or that kind of thing come in and teach this portion. It was up to the use of force instructors to teach this because this needs to be integrated as a system into everything that we're doing. It goes hand in hand with putting our hands on people before we do that, while we're doing it,
Yeah.
and after we're doing it. And if we want any of that to actually stick, we need to make the environment that they're using it in look like the real environment. And so the expectation is for the recruits there that they are not only learning this, but employing it throughout their use of force training so that it becomes part of it. It's not a separate thing that we
No, of
do
course.
and we
Yeah.
check a box going, oh, I tried de-escalating. It didn't work. It's
It's the
that's
integration. Yeah.
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 It's the integration. It's the integration.
But are there certain, I hate to call it techniques. You can also use it tactics, strategies, whatever you. But are there certain things? Well, let's call it techniques. You can
Sure.
use like active listening. In my book, I talked about the FBI ladder, like building rapport and then on and so on. And
Yes.
are in your own, because you say you're on the streets again as a police officer. What do you use to de-escalate the
So
situation?
so interesting, Eric, that you talk about that the staircase
Yeah,
of
staircase. Yes.
yes, that the FBI uses. That
Yeah.
I think is pretty common in law enforcement about we can't go right to giving people telling people to do something or getting compliance or cooperation from them unless we've built a number of steps to get there. And right at the bottom is building rapport with people.
Mhm.
And I see that officers often shortcut this because they want to be efficient. Maybe they don't have a lot of practice at doing that,
Yeah.
but finding something that you have in common with that person and just taking a little bit of time to go, hey, we're kind of the same. Like hey, Eric, I see you've got a jujitsu shirt on. Like,
Yeah.
that's cool. I've done a little bit of it. So to like, where do you train and stuff like that? And now all of a sudden, hey, we have something in common. It is far less likely that you are going to um, be angry with me, attack me, and those kind of things, because now we have something in common because we like people who are like us.
Mhm.
And if we can, as police officers, just find those little commonalities and just take a second at every interaction that we do to go, how can I build some rapport with this person and become a little bit more likable? That is huge. And so we can get into active listening and those kind of things, but those are, um, I think, more advanced skills. They shouldn't be, but they are. If we can just get officers not going right in and being all about the business of
Mm.
policing
Yeah.
and looking at every interaction as an opportunity to build a bit of rapport with people.
Yeah.
I think that it lays a really solid foundation for all of the other tactics, if you will, or
Yeah.
techniques that we may have down the road. Yeah.
And are you aware of any research about the difference between, for example, male and female, or maybe older and younger cops? I mean, there was some research in the Netherlands. I think, if I'm correctly, female officers talk longer and use less force. If I'm correct, but I can be wrong. But
Yeah, you know what? I'm not aware of any specific research. However, if there have been some good studies around um, doctors and doctor-patient relationships and
yeah.
how long a doctor will listen to somebody when they come in before they interrupt.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that I think officers do a lot is that we go in with this mentality of, I'm here to fix a problem. You
Yeah.
came to me with the problem. I've got the solution already loaded in my head. I figured it out on the drive here with the information that it was given by dispatch. And I am now going to tell you how to fix this instead of taking a bit of time to listen to this person. And often people, they don't want their way, they want their say.
Yeah.
Right? They want to be able to tell their story, and just giving people the opportunity to do that. And again, training people in a realistic way, training officers in a realistic way to allow that to happen in training and not have scenarios be so short where you're just immediately getting to the point
About.
all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the same cop, if he's going home and his wife has a problem, I can imagine you don't give the solution anyway. Also not directly, or your kids, or your daughter, or your son. Maybe better to
You're
listen a
right.
little bit. Yeah. But I can imagine that also, if I speak from personal experience, I'm 54 now, 54. I became a lot, how you call it? When I was a young guy, I think, if I'm really honest, if I'm really honest, I liked the physical stuff
Of
at
course.
that time,
Yeah.
because like
Yeah.
running and catching, and later on, like, but you need
You're
the
right.
skills. Yeah.
You do, and you're right. As we get older, putting our hands onto people when we don't need to, et cetera, it starts
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
we're a little more fragile,
Yeah.
and we don't want to get hurt, and we don't want to hurt other people. And you're right. I think a lot of officers, people have asked me like, why did you become a police officer? And the blanket statement, I think, for everybody is because we want to help people.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I see it right now as one of the few professions still available that provides risk and adventure, especially for young people, where
Mhm.
the only place that they're getting that is playing Call of Duty or Fortnite, sitting in their bedroom type of thing. So there's some real opportunity for risk and for adventure and for getting yourself into some pretty crazy situations. And you're right, as younger officers, you want to sometimes rush in and put your hands on people and
Yeah.
those kind of things. And you're right, things change over time where we go, okay, do I need to approach this situation immediately, or can I maybe get some more resources here, or can I do this a little bit differently, and talk this person into handcuffs rather than
Yeah, that
muscling
would
them
be
into handcuffs.
yeah, that would be
Yeah.
great. Is it becoming? I just talked the other day with an old friend of mine. He's now a police. He's the chief of the training department. He said some very strange thing to me. He said, if I if they ask me now at this age to become a police officer, I would probably don't do it anymore. And I said, why? He said, but because there is so much. In the early days, I was proud to be a cop, and now it seems so. All those the societal negativity. How is that in the States and in Canada? How do those young upcoming officers experience this time?
Um, I don't know really what it's like for the United States. It seems again during the pandemic and some of the things that came out of or happened during the pandemic time, like the George Floyd
Yeah.
incident, et cetera, where there was a sort of a shift towards first it was first responders are thank you so much, and then it was defund the police. And it feels to me like the pendulum is swinging back towards people realizing that they need law enforcement. They've tried some experiments, especially in the United States, on the West Coast, of just having no police, and we'll just let people do whatever they want and
Oh,
camp wherever they want, and all. And they're realizing that no, it's we need law enforcement as part of society. Um, and I don't know that things have really changed even over my career. I would say potentially but this is completely anecdotal, that
mhm.
people are a little less perhaps trusting of the police, but overall in the interactions that I have,
Yeah.
people are still very pro police, very thankful for what the police do. Um, and I had, when I was leaving the Calgary Police Service, I had a new officer on the team that I was the supervisor of, and there were some officers kind of complaining about the way things have become, et cetera. And I looked over at him and I said, just so that you know, there's with all this complaining, one day you will be the old cop and you will look back and these are the good old days.
Yeah, yeah, of course. It's
So
always,
because
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's
exactly.
always,
So I don't know. I think people are still people, and when they need the police, they want to be able to pick up the phone and call and have somebody who is competent and caring show up and get the job done, however that looks and with whatever tools are required. Um, and I don't think that's changed over my career.
what is the definition of a good police officer?
Oh, wow. Oh, you're putting me on the spot here, Eric. That's a tough one. I think there's so many facets of being even just for example, a patrol officer. There are
Mhm.
so much expected, where you hear people who are firearms on the firearms side, that every police officer should be able to, shoot the eye out of a fly from across the room, and other people saying, well, every police officer should be at least a purple belt in jujitsu,
Yeah,
and they need to be excellent communicators, and they need to use all the technology, and they need to be excellent investigators, and they need to be excellent drivers, and there's a lot on police officers, and I don't think that anybody can even be amazing in every area, because there's just not enough. There's not enough time in the day, even for all the great training. Um, so I'm not really sure what makes a good police officer. I think what it comes back to is some of the basics, like integrity
mm,
and having a solid work ethic, and recognizing that you are part of the community,
yeah,
and you are there. Your job is there to serve the community. And sometimes that can get lost.
yeah. Well, great.
Yeah,
If can I ask you one more question?
absolutely.
Uh, the first one is, what was a really a good role model of instructor for you? You don't necessarily have to give a name or something, but if you think about a really good police instructor, if we went to if we went to some department, we saw some training. When would you say this is really very good instructor? And with relation to what you speak about in your book, what would I see?
Yeah, there's I've been the benefactor of so many incredible instructors. The one that jumps to mind for me, which is just because it's been something that I have been coaching a lot of other instructors on. I go back to an instructor that I had at the Calgary Police Service named Gary McDougall,
Mm,
and he teaches a lot of the interpersonal communication stuff. He's a hostage negotiator, and he has a questioning technique that he uses to keep everybody engaged that I talk about in the book. He didn't invent it, but he did a great job and was an excellent role model for me. And that is having a questioning technique with your students that when you're teaching in a classroom setting, and it's four parts, and it's called pose, pause, pounce, bounce.
mm,
So I'll just break that down really
yeah.
quickly. And the first is to pose the question. So if I were to say in a classroom of people, Eric, tell me about whatever it is. Now everybody around you can turn off their brain and go, huh, well, let's see what Eric has to say about this, because I'm off the hook here. I don't need to answer. If we pose a question to the whole class and nobody knows who you're going to ask, now everybody needs to be thinking about it. So, okay, well, did they or did they not hold the Olympics during World War II? And now everybody's thinking. And for some teachers, they even go so far as to call this a no hands up questioning technique, meaning even if you think you know the answer, you don't raise your hand. I find it doesn't really matter for the students that I have. Then I'll choose somebody. Eric, what do you think? And then you get the answer. So that's the pounce. So we've pounced on a person. Or I'm sorry, there's pause in there. So we've posed the question, we pause, and we let everybody think about it and go, oh, is he going to ask me? And they're all searching their brains. And then we pounce on a person and go, Eric, what do you think? Now, you might not be the last person that I ask, because I might not even acknowledge whether that answer is correct or not. And I can shift over and go, okay, Peter, is he right?
Mm,
What do you think? Oh, so nobody is ever really let their guard down. And what I find is that if we can have that kind of a questioning technique, it really keeps students going. There's going to be questions coming. I need to pay attention. And that's been really, really
great.
valuable for
Yeah.
me, and especially to keep the lessons engaging in that it is not a monologue.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware of this now when I'm in a classroom setting where the instructor is just talking, talking, talking. There's no questions to the class, etc. It's something that as an audience member, as a student, I'm hungry for now. Like, hey, ask us some questions, ask us for our experience. And when they don't, I find it very frustrating.
Oh,
So,
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I had to evaluate a training for a very good training company, and it was exactly what I saw there. It was an excellent trainer. No, with a lot of experience and so on, very frankly, but he just talked and talked and talked. And
Right.
I tried to give a little other perspective. Maybe you can ask him questions, yes, but if I ask questions, maybe they don't answer rightly. Like I was thinking, oh man, please, you ask some questions. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and then maybe they won't answer right. Getting the answer wrong is awesome. It
awesome.
shows you that
Yeah,
they're not getting it, okay, or they don't know the answer. And when we are surprised by something, that novelty tends to stick in our mind
yeah.
better than if we just sort of know the answer all the time. And so when you're asked a question and you don't know the answer and you go, man, I really need to think about this, it's engaging some learning inside the minds of the
Yeah,
students. And I think to be a really effective instructor, we have to go there because you're right.
yeah,
Tons of great instructors, they know their stuff.
yeah.
But I sit back and I go, this whole thing could have been a YouTube video that I just, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just a number
But
here
but but
sitting
you
and
see,
listening.
you also see the audience. Of course, they respect him and it's good information, but you cannot listen. You cannot listen for an hour without have
Well,
any.
it better be very engaging,
Yeah, I
right?
better. Yeah,
This instructor better double down on everything else and make it emotionally engaging,
yeah,
and probably use videos and probably use demonstrations and
yeah.
props and all these kind of things to keep people's attention. Um, yeah, but whenever we can involve them, that's going to be
Great.
even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I forget to ask you something about this great book? Is there something you say you have to ask me that, or I have to tell you about it? It's a great book, and yeah.
Uh, I the, I think we've talked a lot about a lot of the concept we've talked about are in the book. One of
Mhm.
the things I did when I wrote it was I had to have it on Audible because I'm a big Audible or audiobook listener, and so that was one of the things. So if people want to listen to me read the book, I do it myself. I'll read it to you like it's a bedtime story if you want to, order it off of Audible. But I'm just really always encouraged when somebody contacts me who maybe I didn't like, I don't know them, I have no reason to know them, and they get a hold of me and they say, hey, I just got your book, I just used it, and wow, this is making a difference. Like that fuels me to continue forward.
How was it to become a writer? Because
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you can probably relate to this. The analogy I use, and I don't even know if I stole this from somebody or if I came up with it myself. Um, but I equate it to running 3 marathons. The first marathon is writing the book, the second is publishing the book, and the third is marketing the book.
yeah,
And people say, how long did it take you to write this? And I tell them 4 years, and they go, oh my God, like I was locked in a room for 4 years writing every day. That wasn't the case. I had a Word document, and I would sometimes work on it for a weekend and then not touch it for 3 months. But when I really sat down and put my nose to the grindstone, it was about 3 months
mhm,
to get a Word document. And
yeah,
then I have to now take this and show it to trainers who I respect to go, hey, is this valuable? Is this a thing? And get their feedback. And then I was very fortunate. I worked with a company called Book Launchers
mm,
that helps authors self-publish and get their book out to market.
mm,
And I could have done it without them, but it would have been very painful and not nearly as successful. The end product wouldn't have been nearly as good because I thought, oh, you send this to an editor and somebody will edit it. Well, no, they have about 4 different types of editors that it
yeah,
goes through, and they really scrutinize it and really put pressure on you to make this product better.
yeah.
Uh, and I learned so much through the process. And now in the marketing process, I still don't know what I'm doing. So I'm thankful for good people like yourself who are
Yeah,
saying, hey, here's a guy with a book that is valuable. Go out and get it.
yeah, yeah. It's very.
Yeah.
Are you planning for another book?
People ask me that all the time, and the answer is no. However, as you know, for somebody, I'm like you, Eric. I'm
Yeah,
constantly learning and constantly challenging what I know and what I think I know. And at one point, when you write a book, as you know, you go, okay, I got to hit this button that goes
yeah,
publish, and
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah,
everything is locked in. And then
yeah.
2 weeks later, you learn something and you
Oh,
go, oh, why did I not put that in there? Or I would change this. And so now it's been 2 years since the book has been published. I've learned a ton. I'm still very thankful that there's nothing that I've put in there that was some type of critical error that I went, oh no, what have I
oh
done?
my God, yeah,
Uh, yeah, but I'm also always learning, and there will be at some point of version 2 that comes out. I don't know, I might leave it for 5 years or something before I do that, this is the nice part about having a course that goes along with it,
Yeah,
because
it's great.
the workbook, the workshop that I do is very alive, and I can, no two groups get the exact same uh, workshop, because I'm always tweaking and those kind of things, which is really great. And then the
Yeah,
book it stands on its own, which is great. But it's sort of the compendium to the real learning, which happens in person, I think.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like by the way, when my first book came out about martial arts, the publisher gave it to me. Then it fell open on a certain page, and there I saw that the main model of the book was the wrong picture. Man, it was so. I
Wow.
I needed, I think I needed 2 years to even look in the book, because as you know, if it's your own book, you're like, ah shit, like did I yeah, no.
Yeah, there's especially
But
when other,
yeah,
yeah,
but
that's
nobody
that's
saw it.
difficult. So, that would be heartbreaking. Yeah.
It's
At least
heartbreaking.
now with one of the things with publishing now, that I didn't know when I started this, is with Amazon, for example, they don't have a warehouse full of your books and they grab one off the shelf. They've got a big machine and they
Yeah,
essentially print a new book. So there is opportunities to make those changes, especially a
true.
critical error that you go, oh, this is the wrong image for this text or whatever. It is fixable. It's a lot of work, but it's still fixable.
Well, my experience now is, because I've now written 4 or 5 books, and I want to try to self-publish now, just for the experience only. And
Yes.
well, let's see.
I think it's easier than ever to do that.
Yeah,
And it's a different model. You have more control because you
yeah,
don't really have anybody telling you this is a bad idea. Maybe it's not necessarily a good
yeah,
thing, but you don't have to follow anybody else's rules. You can do what you want
yeah,
to a certain degree, and I found that very freeing. That if somebody's giving me feedback about my book, I don't have to take it. I can consider it. And, there was still some of the stuff that I got from my own editors. I probably accepted 80% of what they
yeah.
recommended. And the rest was like, no, I'm confident with this and I'm going to go
Yeah.
with this. So, yeah, yeah,
They had to convince me a lot of times. I was so, how
I
do you
bet.
call it? Yeah, like, no, 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 it's my book, no.
Yes.
But I have to say, if you see the difference between the original Word document and the and end version, well, it's such a great thing.
Right.
I
Yeah.
also
And that's
spoke
where
with Yeah, I also spoke with Ken
I,
Murray about his book.
yes.
He had lovely stories about it. But Ken still has to write part two, eh?
He does. Yes. I'm trying to get him to do that. Training
Yeah,
at the Speed of Life. And if anybody hasn't read it out there, it is really sort of the Bible as far as reality based
yeah.
training, and it's a thick manual, and that's a lot of work to go through
Wow.
and do, rework some of that stuff. And Ken says every year he opens his book and he reads it cover to cover to go, is there anything really critical in here that I need to change that would require redoing this book, and there's not. So it still stands the test of time. However, it's always good to get something new out there. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for making time. Did I forget anything? Because sitting here, is there some interesting question I forgot to ask you? Have
I
you
don't
do
think
you,
so. There was one of the things was what kind of other training resources, etc. would I recommend?
Yeah, of
And
course.
we talked a bit about the Trainer's Bullpen,
Yeah,
which, if your listeners aren't aware, it's a podcast that is run by Chris Butler, who is a colleague of mine. I'm one of the co-hosts, but
yeah,
I'm only on there sort of occasionally. But it is an excellent resource as far as you have somebody who is a real master in law enforcement training who is going out and talking to doctors and researchers and other people who have very good things to say, sometimes in domains that we would never consider looking at in law enforcement, and going, hey, how can we apply this to what we do in our own training? And so I think it's super valuable. One of the casts that is recorded now, it's going to come out, is an interview that I did for the Trainer's Bullpen with the author of this book, which is called
Oh,
Powerful Teaching. And that is Patrice Bain,
oh,
co-written with Dr. Pooja Agarwal. And this is a incredible resource as far as retention goes. And they look at it from pre-K to pre-med, all the way through childhood and adult education, as far as how can we really robustly change the way that we teach in small ways to be really effective at having our students retain what they're doing. And Chris and I use a lot of their methods in our methods of instruction course, and I
wow,
talk about some of them as well in my own book. But that's one where I listen to this in the Audible format, and I would be either driving or riding my bike or running. And the amount of times that I would have to stop to make notes on my phone about, oh, this is just gold, here's a gem. And then I would get running again, and I'd have to stop 3 minutes later and make it. It's just very, very rich with learning for anybody who stands at the front of the room and teaches. So highly recommend that one.
great. And if we want to become better speakers and presenters, do you have, for example, a good movie or a TED talk or whatever?
Oh, I can't. There's a ton of great TED Talks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The thing that I tell people is you have to get stage time, just like in comedy.
Yeah.
You have to look for opportunities to get in front of people. It's not gonna happen from reading a book.
No.
You can't learn to swim by watching a YouTube video. You can't learn to be a better gunfighter from reading a book. I mean, it can help you, but you need a lot more than that.
Yeah.
You need to actually get out there and do it. And so my recommendation is for instructors is look for any opportunity to speak to people, because you're going to learn something every time, and not just staying within the one thing that you're told that you're an instructor of potentially in your department. Maybe they need first aid instructors somewhere. Maybe they need people to speak at all kinds of different things. Take all of those opportunities. And then when you're doing it, seek feedback and really be open to have people, especially who are better speakers than you, to give you advice on what you're doing well and what you can improve on. And that's how we get better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the same thing with doing a podcast, because my English, of course, is not that good. But and then I had a colleague who said, "Well, you have to learn English better and so on." But I thought it the other way around. Just doing it, and then sometimes when my wife looks, she says, "Oh man, it should be better." Okay, that's good feedback. But you learn
No,
along the way, making reps.
your English is excellent, Eric. And if that's partly the result of doing the podcast, then that's wonderful. Because if we wait until we are what we think in our mind is good enough, or wait until we're excellent to start doing something, we've already missed out on a lot of opportunities. So yeah.
Well, thanks again.
Oh, thank you, Eric. It's been a fun conversation.
I will put the Zoom talk to an end, and then I like to say you goodbye off record. So for the listeners, thank you for listening again, and hope to see you another time. And hope you enjoyed it. We will make a good blog with it, with all the references and so on. So stay safe until next time.